I drove by a cafe and saw my wife sitting by the window, with another man holding her hand. I parked and walked in calmly. When she saw me, she turned white as a sheet. The man looked confused and asked, "Babe, who is that?" I smiled and answered before she could. "I'm the husband. And you?" You know those days that start off so mind-numbingly boring that you're practically begging the universe for something interesting to happen? Yeah, careful what you wish for, because the universe has a twisted sense of humor and absolutely zero regard for your emotional stability. That was my Thursday, a perfectly unremarkable January afternoon in Portland where the rain was doing its usual passive-aggressive drizzle thing, and I was driving home from a client meeting that could have been an email. Hell, it could have been a text message. But no, Gary from accounting needed to see me in person to tell me his printer was making weird noises, which turned out to be the sound of paper actually printing correctly for once in its miserable existence. I was cruising down Hawthorne Boulevard, mentally planning my evening of reheated pizza and whatever Netflix algorithm thought I needed to watch, when I passed Hazelbean Cafe. Now, Hazelbean is one of those aggressively Portland coffee shops where they serve $12 lattes with oat milk foam shaped like your emotional trauma, and everyone inside looks like they're either writing the next great American novel or pretending to. I usually avoid it because I'm not ready to pay rent prices for coffee, but something made me glance through the big front window as I drove past. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was divine intervention. Maybe it was just really unfortunate timing. Either way, I saw her. My wife, Ivy Parker, the woman I'd been married to for 15 years, the mother of my 2 kids, the person who'd been working late approximately 73 times in the last 4 months. And she wasn't working. She was sitting at a corner table bathed in that romantic Edison bulb lighting that makes everything look like a freaking cologne commercial, with soft jazz probably playing in the background, holding hands across the table with a man who definitely, absolutely, 100% was not me. My brain did this thing where it completely short-circuited for about 5 seconds. You know that Windows error sound? That played in my head on repeat. I actually had to check the rearview mirror to make sure I'd seen what I thought I'd seen, because surely my wife of 15 years wasn't just casually having a romantic coffee date in broad daylight in a cafe with windows bigger than my marriage vows. But nope, there she was, laughing at something this dude was saying, doing that thing where she tucked her hair behind her ear, which she only did when she was flirting or trying to look extra cute. I should have kept driving. A smart man would have kept driving, gone home, called a lawyer, and handled this like a rational adult. But apparently I'd left my rationality back at Gary's office next to his demon printer, because instead I pulled a U-turn that would have made a stunt driver proud, found a parking spot 3 blocks away, because Portland parking is a special kind of hell, and walked back to that cafe with the kind of calm determination usually reserved for people about to do something spectacularly stupid. The whole walk there, my mind was racing through possibilities. Maybe it was her cousin? No, I knew all her cousins, and none of them looked like they modeled for Men's Health magazine. Maybe it was a work colleague? A really handsome work colleague. She'd never mentioned who she felt comfortable enough with to hold hands in public? Yeah, that math wasn't mathing. By the time I reached the door, I'd accepted the truth and decided that if my life was going to implode anyway, I might as well get front row seats to the explosion. I straightened my jacket, took a breath that did absolutely nothing to calm me down, and walked into Hazelbean Cafe like I belonged there, like I was just another Portland hipster looking for overpriced caffeine and existential dread. The place smelled like espresso and broken dreams, or maybe that was just my marriage I was smelling. I spotted them immediately, still at their little romantic corner table, still holding hands like they were in a Nicholas Sparks movie that nobody asked for. I walked over calmly, my footsteps somehow silent on the hardwood floor, and I watched as Ivy's eyes traveled up from her latte and landed on me. The color drained from her face so fast I genuinely thought she might pass out right there in her chair. She went from sun-kissed Portland resident to Victorian ghost in approximately 0.5 seconds. Her hand jerked away from his like she'd touched a hot stove, and her mouth opened and closed like a fish that just realized it was about to become sushi. The guy, Mr. Tall, Dark, and Homewrecker, looked confused. He had that Kindle jawline that probably required its own insurance policy, perfectly styled dark hair that had definitely seen professional products, and a watch that cost more than my car payment. He glanced between Ivy's ghost white face and my probably too calm expression, trying to figure out if I was a crazy ex, a stalker, or something worse. "Babe, who's that?" he asked Ivy, and I had to give him credit for the genuine confusion in his voice. He really had no idea what he'd walked into, and honestly, that almost made it funnier. I smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not an understanding smile. This was the kind of smile you give right before you commit emotional arson and watch everything burn with a strange sense of satisfaction. This was the smile of a man who'd just had his Thursday go from boring to thermonuclear and decided to lean into it. "I'm the husband," I said, my voice steady and clear enough that the couple at the next table definitely heard me. "And you?" The entire cafe went silent. I'm talking library during finals silent. Even the espresso machine, which had been hissing and steaming in the background, seemed to pause out of respect for the drama that was unfolding. Every hipster with a MacBook, every yoga mom with a turmeric latte, every barista with regrettable neck tattoos stopped what they were doing and tuned into the Miles and Ivy show, now playing live at Hazelbean Cafe. Kendall's jaw actually dropped. Ivy looked like she wanted the artisanal floor tiles to open up and swallow her whole. And me? I just stood there, waiting for an answer, because if my life was going to become a country song, I was at least going to get some good material out of it. Okay, let me backtrack here because you're probably wondering who the hell I am and why I just walked into what's essentially a romantic ambush with the emotional composure of someone ordering a sandwich. Fair question. I'm Miles Parker, 38 years old, IT consultant by trade, father of two amazing kids who deserve better than this soap opera, and apparently the proud owner of a wife with a side order she forgot to mention on the menu. Actually, scratch that. I'm not the owner of anything anymore except a growing sense of betrayal and a really unfortunate tendency to make jokes when I should probably be throwing punches or at least crying in my car like a normal person. Let me paint you a picture of my life before I became the star of this afternoon's entertainment at Hazelbean Cafe. For the past 6 months, maybe longer if I'm being honest with myself, Ivy had been working late with the kind of frequency that should have set off alarm bells, air raid sirens, and possibly a whole mariachi band in my head. But did I question it? No, because I'm an idiot who believed in trust and communication and all those other fairy tale concepts they sell you in couples therapy. She worked in marketing at some tech startup downtown that apparently required her to be at the office until 9 or 10 at night, multiple times a week, sometimes even on weekends. I thought she was climbing the corporate ladder, hustling for that promotion she'd been talking about, networking with colleagues, doing whatever it is marketing people do when they're not trying to convince me I need products I definitely don't need. Turns out she was climbing something else entirely, and the only thing getting promoted was her relationship status from married to it's complicated on the relationship Facebook page I didn't know existed. Meanwhile, back at our house in the suburbs where everything was supposedly fine, I'd been playing the role of supportive husband and primary parent like I was auditioning for Father of the Year. I was the guy fixing printers at midnight when my daughter needed to print her science project that was definitely not due tomorrow despite her insistence otherwise. I was the one paying bills, scheduling dentist appointments, remembering which kid was allergic to what, and somehow managing to burn lasagna with the kind of consistency that suggested it was actually a skill. Seriously, I could burn water if you gave me enough time and the right pan. It had become my signature dish, my culinary calling card, the thing my kids would probably talk about in therapy someday. Ivy was the dreamer in our relationship, always finding herself in various expensive and time-consuming ways. First it was yoga, then it was pottery, then it was some mindfulness retreat that cost more than our monthly mortgage. I supported it all because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You let them explore and grow and discover who they are, even if who they are turns out to be someone who cheats on you with a guy who probably uses beard oil unironically. Spoiler alert, she found herself, all right. She found herself reflected in another man's designer sunglasses, probably while he was telling her some pseudo-intellectual garbage about living authentically or whatever nonsense passes for wisdom these days. So there we were, frozen in this moment at Hazelbean Cafe, with every eye in the place watching us like we were the mid-season finale of their favorite drama. Ivy's face had progressed from ghost white to a color I can only describe as oh shit red, and she was stammering something that sounded like words but wasn't quite forming sentences. Kendall was standing now, all 6 foot whatever of him, looking between us like he'd just realized he was in a movie, but nobody gave him the script. Miles, it's not what it looks like, Ivy finally managed to say, and I swear to God I almost laughed right there. I almost lost it completely because that line, that specific combination of words, is literally what every guilty person has said since the dawn of time. It's the cheater's national anthem. It's what people say when it is exactly what it looks like, and they're desperately hoping you're stupid enough to believe otherwise. Oh, I said, managing to keep my voice level despite the fact that my heart was doing this weird thing where it felt like it was simultaneously breaking and hardening into stone. Because it looks like you're holding a stranger's hand in a romantic cafe on a Thursday afternoon when you told me you had a client meeting in Beaverton. But hey, maybe I'm misreading the situation. Maybe this is some kind of elaborate emotional IT consultation I don't know about? Are you troubleshooting his feelings? Rebooting his heart? Installing updates to his relationship software? A woman at the table next to us actually snorted into her matcha latte. I'd found my audience, apparently. Kendall stood up straighter, and I had to admit the guy had presence. He was tall, confident in that way that comes from never being told no, wearing a black turtleneck like he thought he was Steve Jobs, and sporting a watch that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. He looked at Ivy with this expression of dawning horror, like he was a character in a horror movie who just realized the call was coming from inside the house. I didn't know she was married, he said, and there was genuine shock in his voice. He turned to Ivy, betrayal written all over his face. You told me you were divorced. You said your ex was out of the picture. Oh, this was getting better. Not only had Ivy been cheating, but she'd been running a whole alternative reality where I apparently didn't exist or had been conveniently written out of the story like a character who got killed off between seasons. I wondered what else she'd told him. Was I abusive in her version? Dead? Living in another country? Had she given me an interesting backstory, at least? Or was I just boring old non-existent Miles? Don't worry, buddy, I said, and I could hear the sarcasm dripping from my voice like honey, except honey that would probably give you diabetes and trust issues. Neither did she, apparently. The marriage thing seems to have slipped her mind somewhere between our 15th anniversary last month and right now. It happens. Memory's a tricky thing. I forget where I put my keys all the time, so I totally get forgetting you have a whole husband and 2 kids at home. The barista, a kid with blue hair and more piercings than I could count, was no longer even pretending to work. He was just standing there with a milk frother in his hand, watching us like we were live theater. Behind the counter, his coworker had her phone out, and I really hoped she wasn't filming this because the last thing I needed was to go viral as cheated on husband in coffee shop. Ivy finally found her voice, though it came out small and shaky. Miles, can we please talk about this at home? Not here. Not like this. Not like this. I repeated, and now I could feel the anger starting to bubble up through the shock and sarcasm. You mean not publicly? Not where people can see? Kind of like how our marriage was supposed to be not public with other people? That kind of not like this. Kendall was gathering his things, his face red now too. I should go, he muttered. Ivy will. I don't know. This is messed up. Yeah, welcome to the club, man, I said. Meetings are every Thursday. Apparently right here at Hazelbean. Bring your own emotional baggage and a really good lawyer. He left, practically running out the door, and suddenly it was just me and Ivy standing there with an audience of caffeinated strangers who were getting way more entertainment than they paid for with their overpriced drinks. Ivy's eyes were filling with tears, but I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I'll see you at home, I said quietly. And Ivy, bring your explanations. Bring all of them. Because this conversation is going to be a long one. That night, I got home before Ivy did, which gave me approximately 45 minutes to have a complete mental breakdown, pull myself together, and decide how I was going to handle the inevitable confrontation. I spent the first 10 minutes sitting in my car in the driveway, gripping the steering wheel and doing this weird laugh-cry thing that probably would have concerned the neighbors if anyone had been watching. Then I spent another 5 minutes Googling what to do when you catch your wife cheating on my phone, which led me down a rabbit hole of Reddit threads and divorce forums that made me feel simultaneously better and infinitely worse about my situation. By the time I actually made it inside, I'd gone through the entire emotional spectrum twice and landed on a strange hybrid of numbness and rage that I can only describe as calm fury. It's that special state of mind where you're so angry that you loop back around to being eerily composed, like the eye of a hurricane if the hurricane was powered by betrayal and spite instead of atmospheric pressure. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kids were at Ivy's mother's place for the night, which in retrospect was awfully convenient timing. Had she planned this? Had she known I might find out and strategically removed our children from the blast radius? Or was it just dumb luck that I discovered her affair on the one night we had the house to ourselves? Either way, the silence was oppressive, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own increasingly unhinged thoughts. I did what any rational person would do in my situation. I made popcorn. Not the microwave kind, but the real stuff, the stovetop kind that requires actual effort and attention, because apparently when your world is falling apart, the most important thing is ensuring your snacks are artisanal. I pulled out the big pot, added oil, listened to the kernels pop with this weird sense of satisfaction, and then dumped an irresponsible amount of butter and salt on top. If my marriage was going to implode, I was at least going to have good food while watching it happen. I settled onto the couch with my bowl of emotional support popcorn, turned on the lamp so the living room had that perfect interrogation lighting, and waited. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't put on music. I just sat there in the semi-darkness, eating popcorn one kernel at a time, practicing different opening lines in my head. Welcome home. Honey, how was your day of infidelity? No, too bitter. Hey babe, funny story about my afternoon. Too casual. So who's the dude? Too direct. I was workshopping my material like a comedian preparing for the worst set of his life. I heard her car pull into the driveway around 8:30. The engine cut off. A pause. Probably sitting in her car, gathering courage, maybe texting Kendall about how badly things went, maybe calling her mom, maybe just screaming into the void. The car door opened and closed. Footsteps on the walkway. Keys jingling. The front door opening slowly, cautiously, like she was entering a house that might be booby-trapped. She stepped inside and saw me immediately. I was impossible to miss, sitting there on the couch in the lamplight with my bowl of popcorn like I was settling in for movie night. Except the only feature presentation was our marriage crashing and burning in real time. Miles, she said, and her voice was small, careful, the voice of someone approaching a wild animal they're not sure is going to attack or run away. Ivy, I replied, popping another kernel into my mouth. Welcome home. How was your day? Mine was interesting. Really interesting, actually. You want some popcorn? I made plenty. I figured we might be here a while. She closed the door behind her, set her purse down on the entry table with shaking hands, and walked into the living room like she was walking to her own execution. She sat in the armchair across from me, not on the couch next to me, which was probably smart because I wasn't sure if I wanted to hug her or throw my popcorn at her or both. I can explain, she said, and those 3 words might be the second most cliched phrase in the cheating handbook, right after "it's not what it looks like." I'd love that, I replied, and I was impressed by how steady my voice sounded considering my internal organs felt like they were trying to escape my body. I would absolutely love to hear your explanation, because the last time I saw someone look as guilty as you did this afternoon, it was our dog sitting next to a pile of chewed-up shoes. And at least he had the decency to look ashamed about it immediately instead of trying to gaslight me about whose shoes they were. She flinched at that. Good. I wanted her to flinch. I wanted her to feel even a fraction of what I was feeling, though I suspected that was impossible because she'd had months to prepare for this conversation while I'd had approximately 6 hours. His name is Logan, she started, and I almost laughed because of course it was Logan. Of course this guy had a name that sounded like a character from a CW show. Logan Reese. He's a life coach. A life coach. I interrupted, and now I did laugh. A short bark of a laugh that sounded slightly unhinged even to my own ears. A life coach. Okay, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. So just to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, you've been cheating on me with a man who charges people money to tell them how to live their lives? A guy whose entire profession is based on the concept that he knows better than everyone else how they should exist in the world. It's not like that, Ivy said, and she was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I'd used up my sympathy somewhere between the cafe and the popcorn making. Then what is it like, Ivy? Please, enlighten me. Explain to me how you accidentally fell into a romantic relationship with a life coach whose life choices apparently include helping married women cheat on their husbands. What does he charge for that service? Is there a package deal? Does infidelity coaching come with a complimentary breathing exercise? She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. We met at a mindfulness retreat 6 months ago. The one in Eugene I told you about. We connected. He understood me in ways that I don't. I finished for her. Yeah, I got that part. I got that part real clear when I saw you holding his hand and gazing into his eyes like he was the second coming of Buddha mixed with Ryan Gosling. What I don't get is why you didn't just divorce me first. Why go through the trouble of lying? Of sneaking around? Of making me feel crazy for noticing you were distant? Do you know how many times I asked you if something was wrong? How many times you looked me in the eye and told me everything was fine? I didn't know how to tell you, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't want to hurt you. Oh, well, mission accomplished on that front, I shot back. Really stellar work. Because finding out by accidentally seeing you on a date definitely hurt way less than if you'd just been honest with me like an adult. Nothing says, I respect you quite like making me look like an idiot while you play house with some guy who probably sells healing crystals and has opinions about chakras. He does energy work, Ivy said, then immediately looked like she regretted saying it. Energy work, I repeated slowly. He does energy work. Is that what we're calling it now? Is that the euphemism? Because I've got to tell you, Ivy, I think the energy in our marriage just got worked pretty damn hard, and not in a good way. She was full-on sobbing now, and part of me, a very small, rapidly shrinking part of me, wanted to comfort her. 15 years of conditioning doesn't just evaporate in one afternoon. But the rest of me, the part that was currently in control, wanted answers more than I wanted to make her feel better about feeling bad about hurting me. That's too many layers of emotion for anyone to process while eating popcorn. How long? I asked. And don't lie to me. I'm going to find out anyway. I work in IT, remember? I can track digital footprints better than the FBI. How long have you been seeing him? For months, she whispered. A little more. For months. 120 days, give or take. A third of a year. An entire season of betrayal. I thought about everything that had happened in the last 4 months. My birthday, where she'd given me a watch and kissed me and told me she loved me. Thanksgiving, where we'd hosted both our families and she'd held my hand during grace. Christmas, where we'd stayed up late assembling bikes for the kids and laughing about how terrible we were at following instructions. All of it had been a lie. All of it had been happening while she was with him. Did he know? I asked. About me? About the kids? Or did you conveniently forget to mention those minor details? I told him we were separated, she admitted. That we were in the process of getting divorced. That you'd moved out. I nodded slowly, processing this new information. So you killed me off in your alternate reality. How thoughtful. Did you at least make it a good story? Did I die heroically? Or was I just boring old Miles who couldn't satisfy his wife, so she had to go find some jerk who gets paid $200 an hour to teach people how to breathe properly? Miles, please. Please what? I stood up, and the popcorn bowl clattered onto the coffee table. Please understand. Please forgive you. Please pretend this didn't happen so we can go back to normal. There is no normal anymore. Ivy, you nuked normal. You took normal out back and shot it, and then ran it over with your car for good measure. The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a crick in my neck that felt like someone had installed a railroad spike in my cervical spine, a mouth that tasted like I'd been chewing on a gym sock, and the immediate, crushing realization that yesterday had actually happened and wasn't just some fever dream induced by eating too much sketchy Thai food. Ivy had slept in the guest room, or maybe she'd gone to a hotel, or maybe she'd driven straight to Logan's energy working arms for all I knew or cared. I hadn't checked on her, and she hadn't checked on me, which pretty much summarized the current state of our marriage. 2 people existing in the same house, but living in completely different realities. I made coffee, burned toast because apparently I couldn't even handle bread without screwing it up, and sat at the kitchen table staring at my laptop like it held the secrets to the universe. In a way, it did. The universe of what the hell do I do now, which is a universe I never wanted to visit, but here I was, unpacking my bags and looking for a place to stay. I did what every betrayed man with Wi-Fi and a burning desire for revenge does in the modern age. I Googled best divorce attorney within 20 miles Portland, Oregon. The results were overwhelming. Apparently, Portland had more divorce attorneys than it had coffee shops, which was saying something considering you couldn't throw a rock in this city without hitting a place that served pour-over coffee and existential dread. I scrolled through pages of law firm websites that all looked the same, with their stock photos of serious-looking people in suits shaking hands and their promises of compassionate representation and aggressive advocacy, which seemed like contradictory concepts, but what did I know? I fix computers for a living. Then I found her. Sasha Grant, attorney at law. Her website was different from the others. No stock photos, no corporate jargon, just a straightforward picture of a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes, sharper cheekbones, and a smile that suggested she'd seen every dirty trick in the divorce handbook and had a few of her own. Her bio said she'd been practicing family law for 20 years and specialized in high-conflict divorces and asset protection. Under her picture was a quote, "I don't believe in fighting fair. I believe in fighting to win." I called her office before I could talk myself out of it. A receptionist answered on the second ring with a cheerful Grant Legal, "How can I help you?" That seemed wildly out of place given the nature of their business, but I appreciated the enthusiasm. "Hi. Yeah, I need to speak with someone about filing for divorce," I said, and hearing those words come out of my mouth made it real in a way that yesterday's cafe confrontation hadn't. This was happening. This was actually happening. Absolutely. Let me check Ms. Grant's availability. She actually has an opening at 11 this morning if you can make it. There was a cancellation. Of course there was. The universe was nothing if not efficient when it came to destroying my life. "I'll take it," I said. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a downtown office that smelled like leather and expensive cologne, waiting for Sasha Grant to finish with another client. The receptionist, whose name tag said Melissa, had offered me coffee 3 times, and I'd accepted all 3 times because apparently my coping mechanism was caffeine addiction. I was on my 3rd cup when the door to the inner office opened and a man walked out looking shell-shocked but somehow relieved, like he'd just survived surgery and was still processing the anesthesia. Then she appeared. Sasha Grant in person was somehow more intimidating than her website photo suggested. She was tall, probably 5'10" in the heels she was wearing, dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and she radiated the kind of confidence that comes from winning battles other people didn't even know they were fighting. "Miles Parker?" she asked, extending a hand. "That's me," I said, shaking it. Her grip was firm enough to crush coal into diamonds. "Come on in. Melissa, hold my calls." Her office was exactly what I expected. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with law books that probably hadn't been opened since the invention of Google. A massive desk made of some dark wood that looked like it had witnessed 1,000 divorces, and framed diplomas on the wall that screamed, "I know what I'm doing, and you should trust me with your future." There was also a coffee maker in the corner that looked more complicated than the dashboard of a fighter jet, and a mini fridge that I suspected was full of energy drinks and the souls of defeated opposing counsel. "So," she said, settling into her chair and gesturing for me to sit across from her. "Tell me everything. And I mean everything. Don't leave anything out because you think it's embarrassing or irrelevant. I've heard it all, and I promise you, your story isn't even in the top 10 weirdest ones I've dealt with this month." I told her. Everything. The cafe, the hand-holding, Kendall Logan and his life coaching business, Ivy's mindfulness retreat, where she apparently found everything except mindfulness, the confrontation at home, the 4 months of lies, the alternate reality where I was already divorced and out of the picture. Sasha listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad with handwriting that looked like it could be used as evidence of some kind of beautiful chaos. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted prey. "Oh, honey," she said, and the term of endearment somehow didn't diminish the steel in her voice. "We can work with this. We can work with this so much." She started drafting a plan right there, talking fast, her pen moving across the legal pad like she was composing a symphony of revenge. Asset protection strategies, custody preparation, evidence collection protocols. She rattled off legal terms I didn't understand, but liked the sound of anyway. Temporary restraining orders, financial disclosures, forensic accounting. She made divorce sound like a military operation, which I guess it kind of was. "We'll need proof," she said, looking up at me with those sharp eyes. "Texts, calls, credit card statements, bank transfers, anything that shows infidelity or financial impropriety." You'd be amazed how many people use joint accounts to finance their affairs. Do you have access to your banking records? I grinned, and it was the first genuine smile I'd managed since yesterday. You're talking to a man who tracks router connections and monitors network traffic for a living. I have receipts. I have spreadsheets. I have data going back 6 months that I didn't even know I'd need, but apparently I'm a digital hoarder, and it's finally paying off. Sasha's smile widened. I think I love you a little bit. Do you know how rare it is to have a client who actually has documentation? Most people come in here with feelings and suspicions. You're coming in here with evidence. We're going to destroy her. I don't want to destroy her, I said, then paused. Okay, that's a lie. I kind of do want to destroy her. But mostly I just want to protect myself and my kids. I want to make sure I'm not the one who gets screwed here. You won't be, Sasha said with absolute certainty. Not on my watch. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to file for divorce on grounds of adultery. Oregon is a no-fault state, but infidelity still matters when it comes to custody and asset division, especially if marital funds were used. We're going to request primary custody of the children, claiming that her behavior shows poor judgment. We're going to freeze joint accounts so she can't drain them. And we're going to get a forensic accountant to go through every penny she's spent in the last year. My phone rang. Ivy's mom. Perfect timing. I looked at Sasha. Do you mind? Actually, put it on speaker, she said. I want to hear this. I answered. Hi, Carol. Miles, honey, I just talked to Ivy. Carol's voice was dripping with the kind of forced sweetness that came with trying to smooth over her daughter's catastrophic life choices. She told me what happened. I think you're both overreacting. She just made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. You can work through this. A mistake, I repeated, looking at Sasha, who was grinning like Christmas had come early. Yeah, Carol, she made a mistake. She made about $12,000 worth of mistakes at various cafes and hotels according to the bank transfers I pulled this morning. That's a lot of mistakes. That's like a year of college tuition worth of mistakes. Silence on the other end. Then, $12,000. Give or take. I'm still going through the statements. There might be more. Turns out life coaching isn't cheap, especially when you're paying for someone to coach you right into an affair. More silence. Then Carol's voice, smaller now. I didn't know it was that much. Yeah, well, now you do. Look, Carol, I appreciate you trying to help, but this isn't something we're going to work through. This isn't a disagreement about where to go for vacation. She cheated. She lied. She used our money to do it. And now I'm sitting in a divorce attorney's office planning my exit strategy. So if you want to help, maybe call your daughter and suggest she gets her own lawyer, because mine looks like she eats people for breakfast. Sasha gave me a thumbs up. A week later, I was sitting at my desk pretending to work on a server configuration while actually researching whether you could legally change your identity and move to Alaska to live among bears who would never betray you, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it because unknown numbers in my world usually meant either spam about my car's extended warranty or some kid trying to sell me solar panels. But something made me open it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was fate. Maybe I was just bored and procrastinating on actual work. The message said, "This is Logan Reese. We need to talk." I stared at my phone for a solid 30 seconds, reading those 6 words over and over like they were written in some alien language I was trying to decode. Logan Reese. Life coach. Energy worker. Professional homewrecker. The man who'd been holding my wife's hand in a cafe a week ago and looked at me like I was the problem in this equation. That Logan Reese wanted to talk to me. About what? How to properly channel my rage chakra. The best essential oils for processing betrayal? Whether Mercury was in retrograde when my marriage imploded. I typed back, hard pass. Then deleted it. Typed, go to hell. Deleted that too. Finally settled on. Why? Because apparently I was curious enough to engage with this disaster, but not committed enough to seem interested. The 3 dots appeared immediately, like he'd been sitting there waiting for my response. Please. It's important. I have information you need to see. Information I needed to see. What could he possibly have that I needed? A manual on how to ruin someone's life? A certificate proving he'd graduated from the school of terrible decisions with honors? I should have said no. I should have blocked the number and gone back to my fantasy about Alaskan bears. But curiosity has killed smarter cats than me, and apparently I had a death wish when it came to emotional self-preservation. Where? I typed. Hazelbean Cafe. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. Of course. Of course, he wanted to meet at the scene of the crime. The place where my marriage had publicly combusted like a meth lab in a Michael Bay movie. Maybe he was sentimental. Maybe he thought neutral ground meant the place where we'd already had one dramatic confrontation. Maybe he just really liked their overpriced coffee. Either way, I found myself typing fine before I could talk myself out of it. I told Sasha about it the next morning during what had become our daily check-in calls. She was less than thrilled. "Are you insane?" she asked, and I could hear her tapping her pen against her desk, which she did when she was annoyed but trying to stay professional. "Why would you meet with him? He's probably recording you. He's probably trying to bait you into saying something he can use against you." Or, I said, he's actually got information. What if Ivy did something worse? What if there's more money missing? What if he knows something that helps our case? Sasha sighed, the sound of a woman who dealt with too many impulsive clients making terrible decisions. "Fine, but record the conversation on your phone. Keep it in your pocket, voice memo on. And Miles, don't punch him. I know you wanna, but don't. Assault charges won't help us in custody court." I wasn't planning on punching him. I lied. I had definitely been fantasizing about punching him, extensively, in great detail. At 2 o'clock the next afternoon, I walked into Hazelbean Cafe for the second time in 8 days, and it felt exactly like returning to a crime scene. Except this time I was meeting with my co-victim or accomplice, or whatever the hell Logan counted as in this situation. The place looked the same, smelled the same, still full of people typing importantly on laptops and drinking beverages that cost more than a reasonable person should spend on liquid. Logan was already there, sitting at a table in the back corner, far from the window where he and Ivy had their romantic moment. He looked different than he had a week ago, less put together. His hair wasn't perfectly styled. He had stubble that suggested he'd forgotten to shave, and he was wearing a plain gray t-shirt instead of the designer turtleneck. He looked, in a word, rough. Like someone who'd been hit by the same truck that had flattened me, except from a different angle. I walked over, and he looked up. "Thanks for coming," he said, and his voice was quieter than I remembered, less confident. "Let's skip the pleasantries," I said, sitting down across from him without ordering anything. "You said you had information. What is it?" He glanced around nervously, like he was worried someone might be listening, which was ridiculous because nobody in here cared about two dudes having a conversation. They were all too busy Instagramming their lattes and pretending to work on their screenplays. He reached down next to his chair and pulled up a folder. Not a digital folder on a tablet or phone, but an actual physical manila folder like we were in a spy movie from the 1970s. He slid it across the table toward me. "I've been lied to," he said. "By Ivy. About everything." I opened the folder, and holy hell, it was like Christmas and my birthday and winning the lottery all rolled into one vindictive package. Inside were printouts of text messages, screenshots of conversations, bank statements, receipts. Everything was organized, tabbed, highlighted. Logan had apparently missed his calling as a paralegal because this was better documentation than most lawyers could have assembled. "What am I looking at?" I asked, even though I was already reading, my eyes scanning the pages faster than my brain could process. "The truth," Logan said, and he sounded bitter, which made sense because apparently we were both members of the Ivy Parker Lied to Me Club, and membership was more expensive than either of us had anticipated. "She told me you were abusive, that you'd hit her, that you'd threatened her, that she was terrified of you. She said you were unemployed, living off her money, that you drained your savings gambling. She said you were emotionally unavailable, that you hadn't touched her in years, that you were essentially roommates raising kids together." I looked up from the folder. "And you believed her?" "Why wouldn't I?" He shot back, defensive. "She had bruises once. On her arms. She said you'd grabbed her during a fight. She cried about it. She seemed genuinely scared." "Those bruises were from when she fell off her bike," I said flatly. "In our driveway. I saw it happen. I literally helped her up and got her ice packs. But sure, in her version, I'm apparently some kind of domestic abuser who also happens to suck at gambling and can't hold down a job despite being an IT consultant who makes 6 figures. Logan looked like he wanted the artisanal floor tiles to swallow him whole. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. If I'd known she was lying about all that, I never would've. Would've what? Slept with her? Taken her money? Helped her cheat on her husband and kids? I was trying to keep my voice level, but it was getting harder. What exactly would you not have done, Logan? He was sweating now. Actually sweating, little beads forming on his forehead like his body was trying to escape this conversation through his pores. I thought I was helping her escape an abusive situation. I thought I was the good guy. Yeah, well, congratulations on the character development, I said, turning back to the folder. What's all this other stuff? Payments, he said. She's been paying me. A lot. For sessions that never happened. Look at the dates. Some of these are for times when we weren't even together. She was billing herself for fake life coaching sessions and pocketing the difference somehow, or using it for something else. I don't know. But these transactions from your joint account to my business account, some of them are legitimate sessions, but most of them aren't. I flipped through the pages and my stomach dropped. Transfers from Parker Family Checking to Logan Reese Wellness, LLC. 2,000 here, 3,000 there, 1,800, 4,000, 5,000. The dates went back 7 months, longer than their affair had even been happening according to Ivy's confession. How much? I asked, already doing the math in my head, but wanting confirmation. $22,000, Logan said quietly. Total. Over 7 months. I laughed. I couldn't help it. I laughed so loud that people actually turned around to look at us, probably thinking we were having the world's most amusing business meeting. But it wasn't funny. It was absurd funny. It was my life is a dark comedy funny. $22,000. I repeated, still laughing. Buddy, she didn't just cheat on me. She financed your entire midlife crisis. She probably paid for that watch you were wearing. She probably funded your whole fake therapist life coaching business with my money. I didn't know, he said again. And now he looked like he might cry, which would have been satisfying except I was too busy being furious and weirdly grateful at the same time. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Why now? What's in it for you? Logan looked me dead in the eye. Because I feel like shit. Because I thought I was helping someone, and instead I was just another mark in whatever con she was running. Because you deserve to know the truth, and because. He hesitated. Because I think she's done this before. To other people. There are texts in there where she references someone named Marcus. I think there was someone before me. Marcus. I didn't know any Marcus. But then again, apparently I didn't know a lot of things about my wife. I'm sorry, Logan said. And he actually sounded like he meant it. For what it's worth, I'm really sorry. I closed the folder, slid it back toward me possessively. This is mine now. I'm taking this to my lawyer. You realize this probably implicates you in some way, right? Financial fraud or something. I know, he said. I'll deal with it. But you need this more than I need to protect myself. Use it. Protect yourself and your kids. I stood up, folder tucked under my arm like it was the most valuable thing I'd ever owned, which in legal terms it probably was. Logan stood too, reached for his wallet, pulled out a 20, and put it on the table. What's that for? I asked. Your coffee, he said. If you'd ordered one. Consider it the cheapest session of therapy I've ever provided. I almost laughed again. Instead, I nodded, turned, and walked out of Hazelbean Cafe for the second time in my life. Except this time I was leaving with ammunition instead of devastation. Finally, a win. I walked into Sasha's office the next morning holding Logan's folder like it was the Holy Grail, the Declaration of Independence, and the winning lottery ticket all rolled into one manila envelope of justice. Melissa at the front desk took one look at my face and immediately said, I'll tell her you're here, without even asking if I had an appointment. Apparently, I had the look of a man on a mission, and that mission involved legal warfare and possibly some light property damage. Sasha's door opened before I could sit down. You look way too happy for someone going through a divorce, she said, eyeing me suspiciously. Either you've had a breakthrough about self-love and acceptance, or you've got something good. I've got something better than good, I said, walking into her office and dropping the folder on her desk with the kind of dramatic flair usually reserved for courtroom TV shows. I've got a gift from the affair partner himself. Logan decided to grow a conscience, and it came with receipts. She opened the folder, and I watched her face go through the 5 stages of lawyer excitement. Curiosity, interest, surprise, delight, and what I can only describe as predatory satisfaction. She flipped through the pages, her eyes moving faster than I could track, occasionally making little noises of approval that sounded like a chef tasting a particularly good sauce. Oh, this is beautiful, she murmured, more to herself than to me. This is absolutely beautiful. Financial fraud, falsified billing, embezzlement of marital funds. Miles, do you understand what you've just handed me? This isn't just ammunition. This is a nuclear warhead with a bow on it. I thought you might like it, I said, settling into the chair across from her desk with the satisfaction of someone who'd just won a particularly difficult level of a video game. Logan basically gift-wrapped my divorce case and delivered it with an apology card. Sasha looked up from the folder, her sharp eyes gleaming. We need a forensic accountant. Someone who can trace every dollar, verify every transaction, and testify in court if necessary. I know just the guy. She picked up her phone and dialed a number from memory, which suggested she had forensic accountants on speed dial, which honestly made sense for someone in her profession. Marvin, it's Sasha Grant. I've got a case for you. Can you come by this afternoon? Excellent. Bring your calculator and your sense of righteous indignation. This one's going to be fun. She hung up and looked at me. Marvin Cho, best forensic accountant in Portland. Looks like a substitute math teacher who's disappointed in your homework, but the man can find hidden money in a piggy bank buried in a different state. If there's more to this than what Logan gave us, Marvin will find it. More? I asked. You think there's more? There's always more, Sasha said grimly. People who steal $22,000 don't usually stop there. They just get better at hiding it. Marvin will pull your bank records, credit card statements, everything. We're going to find out exactly what your wife has been doing with your money, and then we're going to make her regret every single transaction. Marvin Cho arrived at 3 o'clock sharp, and Sasha wasn't kidding about the substitute teacher thing. He was in his late 50s, wore glasses that had definitely been purchased in bulk at a discount warehouse, carried a briefcase that looked older than I was, and had the general demeanor of someone who'd spent his entire life being disappointed by other people's financial decisions. He shook my hand with a grip that suggested he'd rather be holding a calculator, sat down, and immediately started taking notes in a little spiral notebook he pulled from his shirt pocket. Tell me everything, he said in a monotone voice that made Ben Stein sound like a motivational speaker. Start from when you first noticed irregularities. I told him about the working late, excuses, the mindfulness retreat, the cafe confrontation, Logan's folder of evidence. Marvin listened without any visible emotion, occasionally writing something down, asking clarifying questions about dates and amounts with the precision of someone who cared deeply about accuracy and not at all about feelings. When I finished, he looked at Sasha. I'll need access to all accounts, statements going back at least 2 years, passwords, credit reports, tax returns. Everything. He's got it all, Sasha said, gesturing to me. He works in IT. He's practically done half your job already. Marvin actually smiled, or at least his mouth moved in a way that might have been a smile if you were being generous. I like organized clients. Makes my job easier. I'll have a preliminary report by end of week. He had it in 3 days. Apparently when Marvin said end of week, he meant, I'm going to work through the night because other people's financial crimes personally offend me. I got a call from Sasha asking me to come in immediately, her voice vibrating with the kind of energy that comes from having really, really good news to share. I dropped everything, told my boss I had a family emergency, which was technically true if you counted discovering your wife was basically running a small embezzlement operation as an emergency, and drove to Sasha's office doing about 15 over the speed limit the whole way. Marvin was there when I arrived, his briefcase open, papers spread across Sasha's desk in an organized chaos that somehow made sense to him. He looked up at me with those disappointed teacher eyes and said, Your wife has been busy. How busy? I asked, not sure I wanted to know, but knowing I needed to. She's been renting a studio apartment downtown under her maiden name, Ivy Chun, for the past 8 months. Monthly rent is $2,200, paid from a separate checking account she opened without your knowledge using her individual income. That account has been receiving regular transfers from your joint account, disguised as payments to various vendors and service providers. Total diverted funds, approximately $38,000. I felt my legs go weak and had to sit down. $38,000? In 8 months. Plus the $22,000 to Logan Reese's wellness business, Sasha added helpfully. We're looking at $60,000 total that she's moved, hidden, or spent on her affair. Marvin, tell him about the credit cards. Marvin flipped through his papers with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. She has 3 credit cards in her name only that you likely don't know about. Combined balance of $14,000. Charges include restaurants, hotels, retail purchases. I have the addresses of the establishments. Several recurring charges to businesses near the downtown studio apartment. My brain was having trouble processing numbers this big. $60,000. That was a year of college tuition. A down payment on a house. A really nice car. That was our family's security. Our kids' future, spent on what? Romantic dinners? Hotel rooms? Furniture for her secret apartment where she played house with her life coach? We've got her, Sasha said, and there was triumph in her voice. We've got her cold. Financial infidelity, marital waste, fraud. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. What do we do now? I asked. Sasha leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers like a supervillain planning world domination. Now? Now we don't do anything. Not yet. What do you mean, nothing? I mean we don't tip our hand. She doesn't know that Logan gave you that folder. She doesn't know we've hired Marvin. She thinks you're just angry about the affair, but willing to work through it, right? That's what you told me, she said last week. I nodded. After our initial confrontation, Ivy had been trying to salvage things, suggesting counseling, promising to end it with Logan, giving me the whole, I made a mistake, but I love you routine that I'd been too numb to properly respond to. So let her think that, Sasha continued. Go home. Act normal. Be the understanding, forgiving husband. Give her rope to hang herself with. Meanwhile, Marvin keeps digging. I keep building our case, and we strike when we're ready. Not when she's expecting it. You want me to pretend everything's fine? I asked. For how long? 2 weeks, Sasha said. Maybe 3. Give Marvin time to finish his full investigation. Let her get comfortable. Let her think she got away with it. Then we file, freeze the accounts, and watch her world collapse. It was manipulative. It was calculated. It was probably borderline cruel. I loved it. So that's what I did. I went home and became the world's best actor, deserving of an Oscar, a Tony, and probably a Grammy just for good measure. I made breakfast, still burned it, but with love. I asked about her day. I cracked jokes at dinner. I kissed her forehead before bed like nothing had changed, like I didn't know about Marcus or the studio apartment or the $60,000 or any of it. She bought it completely. After a week, she actually said, I'm glad we're working through this, Miles. I think we're going to be stronger than ever. I smiled and agreed, all while thinking about the folder in Sasha's office that was growing thicker by the day. January 10th arrived with the kind of crisp, cold morning that makes you feel alive and vindictive, which was perfect because I was about to legally destroy my wife's entire existence, and I wanted to be fully present for it. The past 3 weeks had been a masterclass in deception, with me playing the role of forgiven husband, while Sasha and Marvin worked behind the scenes like the legal equivalent of Ocean's 11. Except instead of robbing a casino, we were dismantling a marriage and recovering stolen assets. The divorce papers had been filed 4 days earlier, delivered to Ivy at her office by a professional process server named Rick, who looked like he bench-pressed lawsuits for fun. Sasha had insisted on workplace service instead of home service because, in her words, public humiliation is free and effective. I wasn't there to see it, but Rick told me later that Ivy had turned the color of printer paper, locked herself in a conference room, and didn't come out for 2 hours. Her coworker, a woman named Jennifer who apparently loved drama more than she loved discretion, had texted me saying, OMG, what happened? Ivy's losing it, with about 17 crying emojis, which I ignored because I wasn't about to give anyone a preview of the main event. The papers included everything. And I mean everything. The affair, the financial fraud, the secret apartment, Logan's folder of evidence, Marvin's forensic accounting report that read like a crime novel written by someone who really loved spreadsheets. We'd requested primary physical custody of the kids, the house, division of remaining assets in my favor, and reimbursement for the $60,000 she'd essentially stolen from our marriage to fund her midlife crisis romance. It was comprehensive, devastating, and according to Sasha, airtight enough to use as a flotation device. Ivy had called me that night, hysterical. Miles, what is this? How could you? We were working on things. Were we? I'd asked calmly, sitting on the couch in the house that was about to be solely mine. Because I was working on collecting evidence while you were working on lying to my face for 3 more weeks. Funny how that works out. She'd tried to argue, to explain, to convince me to drop it and go to counseling instead, but I'd cut her off with a politeness that I knew would hurt more than anger. See you in court, Ivy. Bring a good lawyer. You're going to need one. She'd hired Trent Ashford, and I knew this because Sasha had literally laughed when she got the notice of representation. Trent Ashford? Oh, this is going to be fun. He's all style, no substance. Went to law school because he thought it would impress women, graduated middle of his class. Handles divorces for people who care more about looking good than winning. He'll show up in a $1,000 suit and lose in a $100 case. Now here we were, January 10th, walking into the Multnomah County Courthouse for the pre-trial hearing that would set the tone for everything to come. I was wearing the one good suit I owned, a navy blue number I'd bought for a wedding 5 years ago and had worn approximately 3 times since. Sasha was next to me in her power outfit, a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe combined, heels that added 3 inches to her already intimidating height, and a leather briefcase that I was pretty sure could double as a weapon if needed. Remember, she said as we walked through the metal detectors, let me do the talking. Don't react to anything Ivy or her lawyer says. Keep your face neutral. Think of it like customer service. You're dealing with an annoying client, but you have to stay professional. I work in IT, I reminded her. I once explained to a CEO why he couldn't just delete the virus by moving it to the trash. I can handle neutral. We took the elevator to the 4th floor, walked down a hallway that smelled like floor polish and broken dreams, and entered courtroom 4B. It was smaller than I expected, less law and order, and more DMV waiting room with wood paneling. There were rows of benches, a judge's bench that looked appropriately imposing, tables for each side, and absolutely none of the dramatic lighting you see on TV. Ivy was already there, sitting at the defendant's table with Trent, who looked exactly like Sasha had described. Expensive suit, probably Armani or whatever lawyers wore to look important, perfectly coiffed hair that had seen more product than a beauty supply store, and the kind of confident smile that comes from not knowing you're about to get demolished. He looked like he ordered oat milk lattes and made bad decisions, which was appropriate since his client had made nothing but bad decisions for the past year. Ivy looked awful, which I noticed with a combination of satisfaction and residual sadness that I wasn't quite ready to examine. She was wearing a conservative dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back, going for the "I'm a good person who made a mistake" look. Her eyes were red-rimmed, suggesting she'd been crying recently, and when she saw me walk in with Sasha, she actually flinched like I might attack her right there in open court. We sat at our table. Sasha arranged her papers with the precision of someone organizing an invasion. Marvin slid into the bench behind us, having volunteered to attend in case he was needed, though mostly I think he just wanted to see his spreadsheets win in real life. The bailiff announced, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Hendricks," and we stood as the judge entered. She was in her early 60s, black woman with gray hair, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and an expression that suggested she'd seen every terrible human behavior imaginable and was permanently unimpressed by all of it. "Be seated," she said, settling into her chair and opening a folder that I assumed contained our case details. "We're here for the preliminary hearing in Parker versus Parker. Counsel, state your appearances." Sasha Grant for petitioner Miles Parker. "Your Honor," Sasha said, standing. Trent Ashford for respondent Ivy Parker. "Your Honor," Trent said, standing and adding a little smile that the judge completely ignored. Judge Hendricks looked at the papers in front of her, and I watched her eyebrows rise slightly as she read, which was probably not a good sign for Ivy. "This is quite the filing, Ms. Grant. You're alleging adultery, financial fraud, and misappropriation of marital funds. That's a lot for a preliminary hearing." "Yes, Your Honor," Sasha said, and her voice had that quality of controlled aggression, like a guided missile with good manners. "We have extensive documentation to support all claims. Mrs. Parker conducted a 7-month affair, used joint marital funds to support that affair to the tune of $60,000, maintained a secret apartment, and opened credit accounts without her husband's knowledge. We have bank records, witness testimony from the affair partner himself, and a complete forensic accounting prepared by a certified professional." Trent stood up, smoothing his tie. "Your Honor, my client admits to a brief indiscretion, but the characterization of financial fraud is wildly exaggerated. These were normal marital expenditures." Normal marital expenditures, Sasha interrupted, and Judge Hendricks didn't stop her, which meant she wanted to hear this. Do not include $22,000 paid to a romantic partner's business for fake therapy sessions, or $38,000 funneled into a secret apartment where she conducted her affair. Mr. Parker had no knowledge of these expenditures, no access to the accounts, and no consent for any of it. Judge Hendricks looked at Trent. Counselor, do you have evidence disputing these claims? Trent opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Ivy, who was now actively crying into a tissue, and said, We would need time to review the accounting, Your Honor. This is all very sudden. Sudden? Sasha's voice could have cut glass. Your client had 7 months to be honest. My client had 3 weeks of investigation. I don't think sudden is the issue here, Your Honor. The issue is that Mrs. Parker systematically defrauded her husband and is now facing consequences. Your Honor, Trent tried again. My client is willing to attend counseling to make restitution. Restitution with what money? Sasha asked. The money she already stole? The credit card debt she accumulated? Mr. Parker is requesting primary custody, the marital home, and full reimbursement because his wife has proven she cannot be trusted with financial decisions or honest communication. Judge Hendricks held up a hand. That's enough from both of you. I've read the filing, and frankly, Ms. Grant, you've built a compelling case. She looked at Ivy over her reading glasses. Mrs. Parker, do you dispute any of the financial claims made here? Ivy stood up shakily. Your Honor, I made mistakes, but I love my children. I would never. I didn't ask about your children, Mrs. Parker. I asked about the $60,000. Did you or did you not use marital funds for an extramarital affair without your husband's knowledge or consent? The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the clock on the wall ticking. Ivy looked at Trent, who gave her a slight nod, then back at the judge. Yes, Your Honor, but thank you. That's all I needed to hear. Judge Hendricks made some notes. Here's what's going to happen. Mr. Parker is granted primary physical custody of the minor children pending a full custody evaluation. Mrs. Parker is granted supervised visitation every other weekend. The marital home remains in Mr. Parker's possession. All joint accounts are to be frozen immediately pending full asset division. We'll schedule a full hearing for 60 days from now where we'll address permanent custody and financial restitution. Any questions? Trent stood up. Your Honor, supervised visitation seems excessive. Does it, Counselor? Because I think defrauding your spouse of $60,000 while conducting an affair shows questionable judgment. Supervised visitation stands. We're adjourned. The gavel came down, and it was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. If you've never experienced the schadenfreude of watching your cheating ex-wife's entire social ecosystem collapse like a Jenga tower played by drunk toddlers, let me tell you, it's better than therapy, cheaper than a vacation, and more satisfying than finally fixing that one printer that's been broken for 3 years. Word spread through Portland faster than a food poisoning rumor at a new restaurant, and apparently nothing gets the gossip mill churning quite like a juicy divorce involving financial fraud, secret apartments, and a life coach who thought he was in a romance novel, but ended up in a crime documentary. I found out just how fast news travels when I stopped by the grocery store 3 days after the hearing and ran into Sandra Mitchum, a woman from Ivy's book club who I'd met maybe twice at holiday parties. She was in the produce section, apparently conducting a very serious investigation into avocado ripeness, when she spotted me and made a beeline across the store with her cart rattling like she was in a shopping cart derby. Miles, she said, loud enough that people 2 aisles over probably heard her. I heard what happened. I just want you to know that we are absolutely appalled by Ivy's behavior. Absolutely appalled. The book club voted, and we've decided she's no longer welcome at meetings. I stood there holding a bag of coffee beans, trying to process the fact that Ivy had been democratically expelled from her book club. You took a vote? I asked. Unanimous, Sandra said with the kind of pride usually reserved for announcing a successful bake sale. We have standards, Miles. We can't have someone who would betray their family like that discussing themes of morality in contemporary fiction. It would be hypocritical. Also, she still owes me $15 from when we all went to see that movie last spring, and now I'm definitely never getting that back. The $15 comment kind of undermined the moral high ground, but I appreciated the support anyway. Thanks, Sandra. That's, really something. We're reading The Marriage Plot next month if you want to join, she offered. I know it's called a book club, but Jeff from down the street comes sometimes, and he just drinks wine and talks about his boat, so you'd fit right in. I declined politely, mostly because I'd had enough of marriage plots in real life and didn't need to read about them for entertainment. But the interaction set the tone for what became the most bizarre 3 weeks of social fallout I'd ever experienced. Apparently, when your divorce involves actual crimes and gets discussed in open court, people feel entitled to have opinions about it. And they're not shy about sharing those opinions in grocery stores, coffee shops, and the parking lot of my kid's school. Ivy's Empowerment Group, a collection of women who met twice a month to drink wine and complain about patriarchy while planning their next resort vacation, dropped her faster than hot yoga trend dropped in 2019. I knew this because one of the members, Rebecca, was married to Greg, who worked at the same IT firm as me. Greg pulled me aside during a meeting and said, "Hey man, just so you know, Rebecca says Ivy showed up to Empowerment Group last week, and they basically told her she wasn't empowered enough to be there anymore. Something about how real empowerment doesn't involve lying and stealing." Rebecca was pretty proud of that line. She's been workshopping it. They workshopped kicking her out. I asked. Rebecca has a whiteboard at home, Greg said. Like that explained everything, and honestly it kind of did. Work was getting messy for Ivy too, from what I heard through the grapevine that apparently existed solely to deliver me updates on my ex-wife's crumbling life. Her company, some tech startup called Momentum something or other that sold software I'd never bothered to understand, had quietly restructured her position. That's corporate speak for, we don't want to fire you officially, but we're going to make your job so uncomfortable that you quit. Which is honestly more cruel than just firing someone, but whatever. I wasn't going to lose sleep over Ivy having uncomfortable Zoom meetings. Her assistant, former assistant, reached out to me via LinkedIn of all places, which was weird, but also fitting since everything about this situation was weird. The message said, "Hey Miles, it's Kayla from Momentum. I just wanted to say I'm sorry about everything. Ivy used to make me lie to you about where she was sometimes, and I always felt bad about it. Also, she's being moved to a different department, and everyone here knows why, and it's awkward. Hope you're doing okay." I didn't respond because what do you even say to that? Thanks for the update on my ex-wife's professional downfall, random LinkedIn connection. But I appreciated the sentiment, and it was nice to know that even Kayla, who I'd met exactly once when I picked Ivy up from a company picnic, had been uncomfortable with the lying. At least someone had a conscience. The most satisfying piece of fallout came from Ivy's mother, Carol, who had initially tried to defend her daughter with the kind of maternal loyalty that ignores things like facts and evidence. Remember her? The one who called me saying Ivy had just made a mistake. Well, apparently Carol had a come-to-Jesus moment when she found out that Ivy had borrowed $8,000 from her and Ivy's father for therapy sessions to save the marriage that never actually happened. That money had gone straight into funding the secret apartment, according to Marvin's forensic accounting, which meant Ivy had scammed her own parents while preaching about mindfulness and authentic living. Carol called me crying, actually crying, which made me feel uncomfortable because I'd never heard my mother-in-law cry before and didn't know the protocol for comforting someone who was upset about discovering their daughter was a liar. "Miles, I'm so sorry," she said between sobs. "I had no idea. We had no idea. We thought we were helping. We thought she was trying to fix things with you. I feel like such a fool." "You're not a fool, Carol," I said, and I meant it. "You're a mom who believed her daughter. That's not foolish, that's just love. Unfortunately, your daughter is really good at lying to people who love her." Carol made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "We told her she needs to pay us back. Every penny. And we're not helping with her legal fees. Trent is expensive," she says, and I told her that's her problem. Maybe she should have thought about legal fees before she committed fraud. The word fraud, coming out of Carol's mouth, in her sweet grandmother voice that usually said things like, "Would you like more pie, dear?" was honestly the most surreal part of the whole conversation. But it meant something. It meant even Ivy's own family was done making excuses for her, and that felt like validation I didn't know I needed. Even Logan, poor stupid Logan who'd gotten conned just like I had, was dealing with his own fallout. I heard through, you guessed it, the omniscient Portland Gossip Network, that he'd rebranded his entire business. Logan Reese Wellness was now Reese Accountability Coaching, which was both hilarious and probably smart from a damage control perspective. His website, which I definitely didn't look at multiple times out of petty curiosity, now featured a whole section about learning from mistakes and authentic accountability, with stock photos of people looking thoughtfully at mountains. Translation: please forget that I helped a married woman cheat and took her money. I'm different now, I swear. Meanwhile, back at the house that was now legally and completely mine, I was doing something I hadn't done in years, making it feel like my space instead of our space. I started small, repainted the living room from the beige that Ivy had insisted was warm and inviting to a blue-gray that I actually liked. Bought a new couch because the old one had too many memories of pretending everything was fine while my marriage rotted from the inside. My neighbor Pam, a 60-something retired teacher who'd lived next door for as long as we'd been in the house, showed up one evening with a bottle of wine and a casserole dish that smelled like comfort food and good intentions. Pam was one of those classic Portland neighbors who practiced aggressive kindness. She composted, had strong opinions about native plants, and made it her personal mission to know everyone's business while somehow never being annoying about it. "I brought lasagna," she announced, walking past me into my kitchen like she owned the place. "Real lasagna, not whatever burn experiment you've been subjecting yourself to. I can smell your cooking from my house, Miles, and it's concerning. It's called rustic cuisine," I said, closing the door behind her. "Very European. Very authentic." "It's called a fire hazard," she countered, setting the casserole on my counter and pulling out 2 wine glasses from my cabinet like she'd done this before. She had. Pam had been bringing me food and wine every few days since the divorce news broke, operating under the theory that no man could survive emotional trauma without carbs and alcohol, which honestly wasn't wrong. She poured us both generous glasses of red wine that probably cost more than my usual grocery store selection, settled into my new couch with an approving nod at the color choice, and looked at me with the kind of direct eye contact that meant we were about to have a real conversation. "You look lighter," she said simply. Not weight lighter, though you could stand to eat more of my lasagna. I mean lighter. Like someone took a backpack full of rocks off your shoulders. I sat down across from her, swirling my wine like I knew what I was doing, which I didn't because my wine knowledge peaked at red or white. And does it taste good or like old socks? "Is it that obvious?" I asked. "Honey, I watched you leave for work every morning for 2 years looking like you were marching to your own funeral," Pam said bluntly. "You thought I didn't notice, but I'm old and retired, which means I have nothing better to do than look out my window and observe the neighborhood drama. You've been dying slowly in this house. Now you look alive again. Angry sometimes, sure, but alive angry is better than dead polite." "Dead polite," I repeated. That's exactly what it was. I was so busy being the good husband, the understanding partner, the guy who supported her dreams and didn't ask questions, that I forgot I was allowed to have expectations. Like, crazy expectations such as don't cheat on me and don't steal $60,000. Pam raised her glass. "Low bar, high achievement. Here's to expectations." We clinked glasses, and I took a drink that was probably too big because Pam looked at me with mild concern and said, "Pace yourself. We've got a whole bottle here, and I don't want to carry you to bed." "That would be the most action I've gotten in 6 months, I said, and then immediately regretted it because Pam was like a grandmother to me, and there are things you don't say to grandmothers, even cool ones who bring wine. She cackled though, actual cackled like a witch who found something genuinely funny. "Oh, sweetie, you're going to be fine. You know how I know? Because you can still make inappropriate jokes. That's the sign of a survivor." When my husband left me, and yes, before you ask, I was married once upon a time to a man who turned out to be a complete jackass. I knew I'd be okay when I could laugh about it. Took me about 3 months. "You're doing it in 3 weeks. That's impressive." "Wait, you were married?" I asked, genuinely surprised because Pam had always been just Pam, eternally single, eternally content with her garden and her book club and her neighborhood watch duties. 30 years ago, married for 5 years to a man named Douglas who decided he'd rather be married to his secretary, because apparently even 30 years ago people were still doing that cliché. Pam said, settling deeper into my couch. "Worst 5 years of my life followed by the best 45 years. Divorce was the best thing that ever happened to me. Gave me permission to be selfish, to do what I wanted, to stop performing happiness for someone who didn't appreciate it." "Is that what I was doing?" I asked. "Performing?" Like you were on Broadway, honey, Pam said gently. I'd see you come home from work, and you'd pause in your car for a minute before getting out. Like you were gathering strength, putting on your costume for the evening show of happy husband and stable marriage. Then Ivy would come home even later, barely acknowledge you, and you'd just smile and ask about her day. I wanted to shake you sometimes. Why didn't you? I asked, only half joking. Because people have to figure things out on their own, she said. If I'd told you your wife was making you miserable, you'd have defended her. That's what we do when we're in it. We defend the thing that's killing us because admitting it's killing us means we have to do something about it. You weren't ready. Now you are. We sat in comfortable silence for a minute, drinking wine, and I realized this was the first real conversation I'd had with someone who wasn't my lawyer or the forensic accountant or my kid's confused therapist who kept asking if they needed to process their feelings about mommy's new apartment. Can I tell you something terrible? I said finally. Those are my favorite kinds of somethings, Pam replied. I'm not even that sad anymore. Like, I was devastated at first, obviously. But now I'm just relieved. And that makes me feel guilty, like I should be more broken up about my 15-year marriage ending. But mostly I'm just relieved I don't have to pretend anymore. Pam reached over and patted my hand with hers, which was warm from holding the wine glass and spotted with age spots that she'd once told me were nature's tattoos for surviving. Miles, that's not terrible. That's healthy. You know what's terrible? Staying in something that makes you miserable out of obligation or fear or whatever story we tell ourselves about commitment. You tried. You tried so hard that you didn't even notice you were the only one trying. She gave up on you way before that cafe. The cafe was just when you found out. Divorce is cheaper than therapy, I said, and even I could hear the bitter humor in my voice. Pam laughed again. Depends on the lawyer, but spiritually? Absolutely. Sometimes the best therapy is removing the source of your trauma and starting over. You're not starting over with nothing, though. You've got your kids, this house, your job, and a really good story to tell at parties. I don't go to parties, I pointed out. You will, she said confidently. Give it 6 months. You'll be ready to be social again. Maybe you'll meet someone who doesn't require a forensic accountant to date. Low bar, I know, but we're setting achievable goals here. The idea of dating seemed impossible, like suggesting I climb Everest tomorrow morning before breakfast. But Pam had this way of making impossible things sound merely improbable, and improbable things sound like they might actually happen if you waited long enough and drank enough wine. I should let you get back to your evening, Pam said, finishing her glass and standing up with the grace of someone who'd had a lot of practice drinking wine and maintaining dignity. Eat the lasagna. It freezes well if you can't finish it all, though knowing your cooking skills you'll probably eat it in one sitting. And Miles, stop feeling guilty about being relieved. The trash took itself out. Now you just need to deep clean the house and move on. She left, taking the empty wine bottle with her because she was committed to recycling even during emotional support visits, and I was left alone in my newly painted living room with a casserole dish full of lasagna and the strange, unfamiliar feeling of something that might have been hope. I heated up a plate of Pam's lasagna, which was indeed real lasagna and not the burnt sacrifice to the cooking gods that I usually created, and ate it while scrolling through my phone, deleting old photos of Ivy and me that the algorithm kept helpfully surfacing like, hey, remember when you thought you were happy? Here's photographic evidence of your delusion. My daughter called to say goodnight. She was at her grandmother's again, my mother's, not Carol's, because Carol was apparently still processing her own daughter's betrayal and needed space. Daddy, Grandma made cookies and she says I can have 3, but I already had 2. So can I have 1 more, or does that count as 4? That's 3 total. Baby, you're good, I said, smiling at her math struggle. Okay, good, because they're really good cookies and I didn't want to be in trouble for cookie math. Cookie math is the hardest math, I assured her. Tell Grandma I said hi. She says hi back. And also, did you eat real food today, or just coffee? I had real lasagna from Pam. The neighbor Pam with the nice garden? That's the one. Okay, good, because Grandma worries you're going to turn into a coffee bean. After we hung up, I sat there in my quiet house. My house, mine, legally and completely, and realized that for the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. The shoes had already dropped. They'd hit the floor, bounced, rolled under the couch, and gotten lost in the chaos. And somehow, and possibly, I was still standing. 6 months post-divorce, my life had settled into a rhythm that can only be described as weirdly great, which was not a phrase I ever thought I'd use when discussing the aftermath of my marriage imploding like a building in a controlled demolition. But here I was, living my best divorced dad life, and honestly, I was thriving in ways that would have seemed impossible back when I was eating stress popcorn and discovering my wife's secret apartment. I'd lost a wife but gained clarity, full custody of my kids who were adjusting better than any of us had the right to expect, and better Wi-Fi speed because I'd finally upgraded our router without Ivy complaining about the cost. Priorities change when you're no longer funding someone else's affair, and apparently my priority was gigabit internet and the freedom to spend money on things like functional appliances and food that isn't burnt. The house had transformed from a museum of marital dysfunction into an actual home. The kids had helped me pick out new curtains. My daughter chose ones with stars on them for the living room because they're fancy but also fun. Dad, which was apparently her interior design philosophy and honestly better than anything I would have chosen. My son had requested we paint his room dinosaur green, which turned out to be a shade that the paint store called Fern Gully, but we called Jurassic Park because marketing is everything. I'd even started cooking real food, or at least food that didn't activate the smoke detector as a regular feature. YouTube cooking tutorials became my new obsession, and I'd progressed from burning water to making edible chicken stir-fry, which my kids ate without complaining, though my daughter did say, "It's good, but different from Grandma Pam's cooking," which was fair because Pam's cooking was sorcery and mine was just following instructions really carefully. Work had gotten better too. Without the constant background stress of a failing marriage, I'd apparently become a more tolerable human being. My boss actually said, "You seem happier," during a performance review, which was both nice and slightly concerning because it meant people had noticed how miserable I'd been before. I got promoted to senior consultant, which came with a raise that went straight into the kids' college fund because I was determined to not be the parent who stole from their children's future, unlike some people I could mention, but won't because my therapist says I need to stop bringing up Ivy in every session. Oh yeah, I got a therapist. Dr. Sarah Mitchum, no relation to Sandra from the book club. Apparently Mitchum is just a common name, who specialized in post-traumatic growth, which sounded like something you'd need antibiotics for, but actually meant learning to be okay after something terrible happens. She had an office that smelled like lavender and featured one of those tabletop Zen gardens that I'd spend entire sessions raking while talking about my feelings, which probably said something about my need for control, but whatever, at least I wasn't paying someone to teach me how to breathe wrong. Dr. Mitchum gave me actual candy after sessions, like a pediatrician, but for adults with trust issues. She had a jar of Jolly Ranchers on her desk and would offer me one at the end of every appointment, saying, "You did good work today," like I'd just completed a marathon instead of crying about how I should have noticed the signs earlier. The candy thing should have been patronizing, but honestly, it was kind of nice. Positive reinforcement works, even when you're almost 40. The kids were doing okay, which was the thing I'd been most worried about, and somehow the thing that worked out best. They saw Ivy every other weekend, supervised visits at a family center that smelled like institutional cleaning products and featured board games from the 1990s. My daughter had taken to calling it Mom's Timeout House, which her therapist said was actually a healthy way of processing the situation because kids need to make sense of things in their own language. My son mostly just wanted to know if he could bring his Nintendo Switch to visits, which Ivy's supervisor said was fine, so he spent most of his time with his mom playing Pokemon while she tried to have meaningful conversations about feelings. Ivy had moved into a smaller apartment, not the secret one. That lease had ended and apparently Logan hadn't offered to take over payments, shocking absolutely no one. She was working at a different company doing something with social media marketing, which felt appropriate since her entire life had become a cautionary tale that could go viral. We'd settled into a civil co-parenting relationship that consisted of brief text exchanges about pickup times and whether our son needed his inhaler for the weekend. No small talk, no reminiscing, just logistics. It was better that way. But here's the thing about healing. It doesn't happen in isolation. No matter how much you want to hide in your house with your upgraded Wi-Fi and your non-burnt food. Eventually, you have to rejoin the world. And for me, that happened on a Tuesday at Powell's Books because of course it did. This is Portland, and all significant life events happen at either Powell's or a coffee shop. I was browsing the science fiction section, looking for something escapist because reality had been plenty exciting and I wanted to read about people with problems like alien invasion instead of wife embezzled $60,000 when I literally bumped into someone reaching for the same book. Not metaphorically bumped, actually physically collided with enough force that she dropped her basket of books and I dropped my dignity. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," I said, immediately crouching down to help gather her books, which had scattered across the floor like literary shrapnel. "No, totally my fault. I wasn't paying attention," she said, and when I looked up I saw her properly for the first time. She was maybe mid-30s, curly dark hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing glasses that had slid down her nose from the collision, and a t-shirt that said, "I like big books and I cannot lie," which was either the worst or best shirt I'd ever seen. I couldn't decide. We both reached for the same book, the one we'd been competing for, and our hands touched in a moment so cliché that if it were in a movie, I would have thrown popcorn at the screen. But it wasn't a movie. It was just Tuesday afternoon at Powell's, and she laughed. "You take it," she said. "I've already read it anyway. Just wanted to buy a copy for my nephew." "I haven't read it yet," I admitted. "But if you're buying it as a gift, it must be good. It's about space pirates who are bad at piracy," she said, standing up with her now-recovered basket of books. Very relatable content for anyone who's ever been bad at their job. I laughed, actually laughed, the kind of genuine laugh I hadn't managed in months. "I'm Miles," I said, extending a hand like we were at a networking event instead of having met through bookstore collision. "Tara," she replied, shaking my hand with a grip that suggested she was either confident or had experience with handshakes or possibly both. "Do you work around here? You seem familiar, but maybe I just recognize you from browsing the science fiction section, which I do with embarrassing frequency." "I work in IT," I said, "so I'm around downtown a lot, pretending to fix things that usually just need to be turned off and back on again." "I actually work here," she said, gesturing around Powell's like she was presenting a game show prize. "I manage the fiction section upstairs. Living the dream of being surrounded by books all day and having opinions about whether literary fiction should be shelved alphabetically or thematically." "That's a thing people have opinions about?" I asked. "Oh, you have no idea. The great shelving debate of 2024 nearly ended in physical violence. Someone threw a hardcover Pynchon novel. It was very dramatic and also very Portland. I found myself grinning like an idiot, which was a weird sensation because I'd forgotten what it felt like to smile at someone without it being a performance or a defense mechanism. "So you're telling me bookstore management is more dangerous than I thought?" "Extremely dangerous," she said seriously. "Last week someone asked me where we keep books by that author, you know, the one who wrote that book about the thing, and I almost had an aneurysm. You need hazard pay for that level of vagueness." We stood there in the aisle, blocking other customers who were trying to browse, and I realized I didn't want this conversation to end. Not because I was ready to date or looking for a relationship. I wasn't, not really. But because talking to Tara felt easy in a way that nothing had felt easy in a very long time. "Can I ask you something potentially weird?" I said, and immediately regretted my word choice because potentially weird was not a great opening for any question. "Those are my favorite kinds of questions," she replied, adjusting her glasses with a smile that suggested she meant it. "Do you want to grab coffee?" "Not here, obviously, since you work here." "But somewhere nearby? Unless you're busy, or that's too forward, or I'm completely misreading this situation, which is entirely possible because my social skills have atrophied from years of bad marriage and recent divorce." I said it all in one breath, word vomiting my entire recent history like a nervous teenager instead of a grown man with 2 kids and a mortgage, and I fully expected her to make a polite excuse and flee to the safety of the employee break room. Instead, she laughed. That same genuine laugh from before, the kind that reaches eyes. "I get off in 20 minutes, she said. "There's a cafe around the corner that does half-price drinks on Tuesdays, which is either very sad or very smart, depending on your financial situation. Want to meet me there?" "Half-price Tuesday sounds perfect," I said. "I'll be the guy sitting alone questioning all his life choices, but in a casual, approachable way. I'll be the woman wondering if this is the worst decision I've made this week. But it's only Tuesday, so the bar is low," she countered. 23 minutes later, I counted because apparently I was that nervous. I was sitting at a corner table at a cafe called Common Grounds, which was trying very hard to be quirky with its mismatched furniture and chalkboard menus, but mostly just seemed like every other Portland coffee shop. I'd ordered a regular coffee, black, because I was too anxious to remember what fancy drinks I usually ordered and defaulted to something I couldn't screw up. Tara arrived wearing a jacket over her Book Pun t-shirt, carrying a tote bag that said "Support your local library," and looking slightly flustered in a way that made me feel better about being nervous. She ordered something complicated with oat milk and caramel, then sat down across from me with a smile that was equal parts friendly and cautious. "So," she said, wrapping her hands around her cup. "Divorced, huh? How recent are we talking?" Because I have a rule about not dating people who are still actively processing their relationship trauma, and you mentioned it pretty quickly, which suggests it might be fresh. I appreciated the directness. No games, no pretending, just honest question. 6 months since it was finalized, I said. And I'm definitely still processing, but more in a grateful it's over way than a sobbing into my pillow way. I have a therapist who gives me candy, so I think I'm doing okay. Is 6 months too recent? Depends on the person, Tara said. Some people need years, some people are fine after months. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? And you can tell me to mind my own business if that's too personal for a first whatever this is. My wife had an affair with a life coach and embezzled $60,000 to fund it, I said flatly. I caught her at a cafe, hired a lawyer who terrifies opposing counsel for sport, got primary custody of my 2 kids, and now I make edible stir-fry and have good Wi-Fi. It's been a journey. Tara's eyes went wide. $60,000? On a life coach? What was he coaching? How to rob people? Apparently mindfulness and energy work, I said, which turns out is expensive and also a scam. Who knew? She laughed again, and I was starting to really like that sound. Okay, so you win worst divorce story. Mine was just boring incompatibility. We got married too young, grew apart, signed papers, split our stuff. No embezzlement, no secret apartments, just 2 people who realized they didn't actually like each other that much. How long ago? I asked. 3 years. I'm thoroughly processed and occasionally bitter about the fact that he got the good couch, but mostly fine. She took a sip of her fancy coffee drink. So what are you looking for here, Miles? Because I like you. You seem funny and self-aware and like you've been through some stuff. But I need to know if you're looking for a rebound or a friend or something else. I thought about it, really thought about it, because Tara deserved an honest answer. I don't know, I admitted. I wasn't looking for anything when I walked into Powell's today, but talking to you feels nice. Easy, like I don't have to perform or pretend or hide anything. So maybe just this? Coffee on half-price Tuesdays and seeing what happens. She smiled. I can work with that. A year after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Ivy at the grocery store because apparently the universe has a sense of dramatic irony and decided that significant moments in my life should happen while I'm shopping for produce. I was in the cereal aisle, having an internal debate about whether my kids really needed the sugar bomb cereal they wanted or if I should be a responsible parent and force the healthy stuff on them, when I heard a familiar voice say, "Miles?" I turned around and there she was. Ivy, looking normal, which was somehow more jarring than if she'd looked terrible or amazing. Just normal. Tired, maybe. Her hair was different, shorter, and she was wearing jeans and a plain sweater instead of the carefully curated outfits she used to spend hours assembling. She looked like a regular person doing regular grocery shopping, not the woman who detonated my life with financial fraud and a life coach. "Ivy," I said, and my voice was calm, neutral, the voice of someone greeting an acquaintance they hadn't seen in a while rather than their ex-wife who'd stolen $60,000. "How are you?" she asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice, like she actually wanted to know instead of just making polite conversation. "I'm good," I said, and realized I meant it. "Really good, actually. The kids are great. Work's going well. Life's peaceful." "That's good," she said, and she seemed to mean that too. "I heard you're seeing someone. Tara, right? She works at Powell's. Portland's gossip network strikes again." "Yeah," I confirmed. "We've been together about 6 months now. She's great. Makes me laugh. Doesn't steal from me. Low bar, I know, but I'm working with what I've learned." Ivy flinched at that, but didn't argue. "I deserve that," she said quietly. I deserve worse than that, honestly. We stood there in the cereal aisle, two people who used to share everything now standing 3 feet apart like strangers, and I waited for the anger to come, the bitterness, the desire to say something cutting that would hurt her the way she'd hurt me. But it didn't come. I just felt nothing. Not indifference, exactly, but not pain either. Just the neutral observation that this person used to matter to me, and now she didn't. "Are you happy?" she asked, and her voice cracked slightly on the word happy, like it hurt to say. I thought about my answer. I thought about my kids, who were thriving with the stability of knowing where their parents stood instead of living in the tension of a dying marriage. I thought about my house, truly mine now, painted in colors I chose, filled with furniture I liked. I thought about Tara, who made me coffee in the mornings and laughed at my terrible jokes and never once made me feel like I was performing for her approval. I thought about my therapist and her jar of Jolly Ranchers, about Pam and her casseroles, about Saturday mornings coaching my son's soccer team and Sunday afternoons grilling burgers that were only slightly burnt. "Yeah," I said. "I'm divorced, debt-free, and my therapist gives me candy after sessions. So yes, I'm happy." She nodded, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. "I made mistakes," she said. "I know," I replied, and my voice was gentle because what was the point of being cruel now? "You made mine too. But honestly, Ivy, you taught me something valuable. You taught me to trust my gut when something feels wrong. You taught me to keep copies of everything. You taught me that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing, because it forces you to stop settling for less than you deserve." "I never meant to hurt you," she said, wiping at her eyes. "I believe you," I said, and I did. "I don't think you woke up one day and decided to destroy our marriage. I think you were unhappy and made bad choices, and then made more bad choices to cover up the first ones, and eventually you were so deep in the lies that you couldn't see a way out. But intent doesn't really matter when the result is the same." "I'm sorry," she said. "For what it's worth, I really am sorry." "I know," I said. "Take care of yourself, Ivy." I grabbed the sugar cereal, life's too short for the healthy stuff, and walked away, leaving her standing there in the aisle. I didn't look back. Later that week, I drove past Hazelbean Cafe on my way home from work. The same big windows, the same Edison bulb lighting, the same overpriced coffee probably being served to the same hipsters with the same MacBooks. I glanced through the window out of habit, or maybe curiosity, or maybe just because some part of me needed to see that place one more time. I remembered the day everything fell apart in that cafe. The way Ivy's face had gone pale when she saw me. The confusion on Kendall Logan's face. The silence that fell when I smiled and said those 6 words that changed everything. "I'm the husband. And you." That was the day I stopped being a punchline in my own life story. That was the day I stopped playing the role of oblivious husband, supportive partner, the guy who burned lasagna and pretended everything was fine. That was the day I became the narrator instead of a supporting character, the protagonist instead of the comic relief. Because here's the thing about betrayal, it's going to hurt. It's going to feel like the world is ending, like you'll never trust anyone again, like you're fundamentally broken in ways that can't be fixed. But if life's going to throw you betrayal anyway, you might as well catch it with good timing, serve it back with perfect sarcasm, and turn the whole disaster into the beginning of something better. I drove home to my kids, my peaceful house, and Tara, who was coming over for dinner. I was making stir-fry, only slightly burnt, a new personal record, and for the first time in years, maybe ever, I wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. Sometimes the trash takes itself out. Sometimes the worst day of your life becomes the first day of your actual life. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just living well, laughing loud, and never again settling for anything less than real.